live at the DNC with Mark Longabaugh. He was one of the top advisors to Bernie Sanders' campaign, is now a Democratic media consultant. I got to tell him that you're with Bernie before I tell him that you're a Democratic media consultant.
That's fine with me. I'm proud to have it defined that way.
Okay. So, Mark, I want to ask you about a whole bunch of things about the campaign, about the convention, and about what's going to happen in the future. First, let's start with what's your assessment of how the convention has gone so far?
Well, I think the convention's gone pretty well. I mean, I thought, in any kind of competitive situation where you have a primary that has been as competitive as this one has between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, and the troops of each camp come together in such a close space, there's always, a little bit of shoulder bumping that goes on. But I think Bernie gave a tremendous speech Monday night. And I got to tell you, the moment I actually was, the Clinton folk were kind enough to put us on the stage during the speech, and I almost teared up, with the response that Bernie got from the people in the hall. And I know he was affected by it too, so it was like a great culmination. I didn't think we were going to get to speak for 15 minutes because I didn't think Bernie's, people were going to stop. And look, I got to say there were Clinton folk in that crowd enthusiastic too.
Yeah, no.
And I think we've talked about a lot of the conflict this week. I think we ought to talk about some of the love too, right? And so so I think that was there. And Bernie gave a good speech. I mean, a lot of what we've heard over the months was there.
Yeah, and, I'm surprised he kept it to under an hour and 15 minutes. I've been there.
So I thought that was great. It was prime time coverage, the way in which we wanted it to end for Bernie, and I thought he felt really good about it. And then, after the roll call, I think he did a very classy thing by admitting that we were short on delegates and that Hillary Clinton had won, and the convention ought to nominate her basically by acclamation. And so he did that.
Yep. And so it was a great moment, and it was emotional. I almost got a little teary-eyed when they wouldn't let him speak for a couple of minutes.
No, that's what I mean. That was the moment.
Yes,
it was it was unbelievable. It was just, there was just so much enthusiasm for him, and Keith Ellison gave it, who's just a tremendous. I'm a huge fan, and he gave a great introduction, and then the video, which was emblematic in some ways for the campaign, and so it was great.
So let's go back before we go forward. When you guys first started the campaign, any sense that it was going to culminate in a night like that, with overflowing love and 46% of the vote? And I mean, it certainly didn't seem probable at the beginning.
Well, I don't know. I don't want this to sound self-serving, but I was one of those people that believed from the beginning that there was an opening for Bernie Sanders. And there was, if you go all the way back, there were, Elizabeth Warren, the draft Elizabeth Warren thing was going on at the time, and I remember saying to the senator, look, I think the progressive wing of the party is dying for a champion.
Yep.
And the party has changed over the last decade and a half. The party is more progressive now. It is younger now. And I think they're dying for a champion like you who's going to give a full-throated progressive message to the country. And I think if you just tell them you're coming, they will rally around you. And so I really did believe there was an opening. I also, one of the other things over my long political career is I have run New Hampshire for several presidential campaigns. I worked for Bill Bradley in 2000 there, and I always thought that the senator had an ability to win New Hampshire. And if you can win New Hampshire in the presidential process, you can take off. And sure enough, that proved to be true. So I always believed in him from the beginning, but look, there was a lot of skepticism at the beginning, and and I was one of those guys helping to put the campaign together. I would call people up, Democratic political activists from over the time, advanced people, field people. Nobody wanted to sign up, and so.
And I bet there was a little bit of a swing in that momentum at some point.
Oh, well, really, yeah, it started to swing in the fall. I mean, that summertime run where we went to Minneapolis and had 5,000 or 8,000, and then we got to Madison and had thousands in Portland, and it just kept building, and all of a sudden people were going, wow, something's going on here.
So now let's talk about the future a little bit. First of all, everybody's wondering what's the future for Bernie Sanders. What's your take on that?
Well, I think Bernie Sanders goes back to the United States Senate as arguably, other than the leadership, one of the most powerful members of that, and arguably the most powerful member other than the leadership. He has a 50-state organization. He has a fundraising base that is second to none in the Democratic Party, and 13 million votes. So those are people that can be mobilized on behalf of legislation in states all across the country. I think he's going to. I'm bullish on the fact that I think the Democrats will take back the Senate, and I think he'll have a committee chairmanship, and I think he's going to be very powerful.
So how about this campaign? Do you know if Hillary Clinton has asked Bernie Sanders to do some of his rallies
absolutely,
not just on our behalf, but on behalf of the Democratic Party and progressive ideas?
Well, Bernie Sanders is going to do that on his own. I mean, that is what's next for Bernie Sanders, and for myself as well. I mean, I think many of us, and I think you would join this camp, we think something really special got started here, and I think it is the beginning of a movement to reshape the Democratic Party and reshape politics in America and move it in a more progressive, more humane fashion than we have seen in a long time. And we've already done that. I mean, look at the platform that we're on. I mean, from a minority position on those committees, we basically wrote a platform that is the most progressive in Democratic Party history. And that's something that all of the people who are involved in Bernie's campaign should be very proud of, because they helped make that happen.
Forward?
Yeah, I think none of this is, there's no specifics formed up yet, but clearly the Clinton campaign has communicated to the senator that they would love to have his help in the fall. He said that he'd be willing to help, so he's willing to travel and go to campaign in battleground states. I also think he wants to get out and help campaign for United States Senate candidates to help take back the Senate, as well as the House and other progressive candidates up and down the ballot, as he's talked about. We're not, he's not just going to campaign at the top. He's going to go all the way to the grassroots, whether it's, clerk of courts, city council, you name it. If you're a progressive, he wants to get out and help build the party.
So let's talk about what I view to be the hardest question, which is what's next for the Democratic Party. So let's say Hillary Clinton wins.
Right.
You already mentioned you guys fought on some of those issues, or you won on some of those issues. We hope that Hillary Clinton actually delivers on some of those issues.
Right.
But the core of the party, is it controlled by corporate donors? Is it not controlled by it? So that's a really tough one to resolve.
No, I think that's really tough, and I think that is true, not just at the presidential level. It's true at the congressional level, and I think this campaign began the first move to break that grip, break that lock on the way in which we fund our campaigns. And it's not going to happen all at once, but I think we got to continue to push forward. And I think, I think the success that Senator Sanders had over the course of this campaign in terms of his critique of Wall Street and what they did to wreck our economy, and the fact that they got off scot-free and they should have paid a bigger price than they did, and now it's obligatory for them to step in and start to pay the price, like on his education plan, which is time for them to give back, right? I think a lot of Democrats saw the resonance of that, and let me tell you one thing, at 30 years in politics, when politicians start to see a message work, they pay attention. And so I think that has given a lot of people, not just on the money side, but in terms of how they're going to vote, what their messages are. And it's not going to. I'm not being a Pollyanna here, as if it's all it's going to change. But I think we've made some big strides.
But as you were talking about that, and I was thinking about what's going to happen in reality, I begin to see that there might be another schism coming. I mean, look, I don't want to be pessimistic about that, but if I imagine that if Hillary Clinton does not go to regulate the banks and does do the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which I would be honestly shocked if she didn't do.
I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, I just don't. I mean, I've actually been as we've been working the floor. I mean, the Hillary folk actually have no TPP buttons of their own at some. So
you really think she's not going to do TPP?
No, she will not. I'm quite convinced. I mean, the question is whether it comes up in the lame duck. But basically, the Republicans have said no, that's not going to happen. I mean, McConnell came up and said that pretty clearly. So I don't know. And by the way, I got my no.
You got to stop the TPP on ban.
So
I know where you lie. I know where you lie. All right, let me ask one more question here. That's very difficult to answer, not just because it's hard to know, right?
Yeah.
But is there a possibility that if the Democratic Party goes back to drifting right, that the progressives mount up and ride again?
Well, I think, let me step before that. Progressives are going to mount up and ride in the primaries of 2018. And I think that's where you're going to start to see a lot of change in the party. Back to your question, I mean, I think that the Bernie revolution is going to start to take over state parties all across the country. We've already seen it over the course of this year after we elected delegates, got organized in all of these states. I think if you're a hidebound conservative party operative in any state party in America, I'd be nervous because Bernie's people are coming. And
I love that kind of talk.
Right, and we're gonna go take over chairmanships. We're gonna go take over state parties, all democratically, all peacefully, all part of the process. But we're gonna make this a more progressive party, and so I think as that happens, the DNC becomes more progressive, the machinery becomes more progressive, and then we're gonna go into primaries, and we're gonna elect. We're gonna find progressive candidates for the United States Senate, for the House, up and down the ballot. And especially this is why it's important. We had a training thing yesterday for down ballot, lower ballot folks at the grassroots level. Because that's where the farm team is. You can't run for Congress until you got elected to city council or state rep.
Yep.
And so we're gonna work to elect as many progressives as we can, and change the composition inside of those primaries.
So then it sounds like, and I've heard that laid out before, but the way you explained it really resonated with me. And sounds like this intra-party fight has just begun. And I don't say that in a bad way. I say it in a good way. And I mean, that's what it should be.
No, that's absolutely right. Absolutely, it's just begun. And I don't mean that in a bad way either. I mean that in a totally democratic way our system is supposed to work way. Competition of ideas. That's what Senator Sanders said throughout, right? Which is we may have disagreements, and we have, and he clearly had disagreements with Secretary Clinton. But we had a democratic process, and we aired those out, and I think that was good for the country.
Yep.
I think we were very pleased that she came to a lot of our positions, and that's what the debate demands. And and this is one of the things I was most proud about working for Senator Sanders, which is, he just planted his flag on the issues, and he never wavered. Right? He said we ought to have free college education, and he went out and fought for it, and I think we're going to get it. He said we got to deal with climate change, and we got to put a price on carbon. He didn't hedge. I mean, that's a controversial position. Now we have it in our platform. We're going to go fight. I just saw Gene Karpinski was on the floor here, right? Gene Karpinski and the League of Conservation Voters endorsed Hillary Clinton in the primary. Gene Karpinski's got to be happy beyond belief that Bernie Sanders went and fought for a platform that's more progressive than the candidate he endorsed started off with. So you know what I mean? So
yep.
That's how change happens. And
I love it.
Right. So I was just proud to stand with Bernie Sanders throughout the course of this campaign, because he just said everything I always believed, and he never trimmed his sails. And so that's a great way to campaign.
Absolutely. So last thing is, Mark, what's next for you? Because the campaign's over now.
Yeah, campaign's over now. A lot of other Democrats that we're going to go out there and work for. My partners and I work for a host of progressive causes in the environmental community. Everytown Mayors Against Illegal Guns. We work for the ACLU. I mean, we have a lot of progressive causes that we're going to get back to, that we had to put on hold perhaps for a little bit. But so we're going to go out and elect progressive Democratic candidates, and that's the work of our lives, and that's what we're going to get it back to.
I love it. Thank you for joining us,
well,
Mark.
thank you.
Really
now listen, I want to give you a shout out, because I think I told you this before we went on air. My two sons, Will and Matt, are huge fans of your show. They're part of the Young Turks Nation, and they're more excited that I'm doing this interview with you tonight than anything I've done in the entire campaign. So,
well, thank you, Will and Matt. We appreciate you watching and letting your dad on.
All right.